Welcome back into the Ohio MMA Podcast, making the return after a little bit of a break. Joining me on today's episode is a fighter. The last time we talked, we were preparing for the Ohio MMA Awards, and this guy won one of the awards, the Amateur Knockout of the Year, Sinisa Jovic. What's up, man? How's it doing? How's it going?
Good, man. What's up? How are you?
Doing great, man. I been wanting to get you on. You had the big knockout. You won for your nasty left hook knockout over Isaiah Simmons back at Cage Center 28. So, what was it like to win an award and see how much fan support you have behind you?
It was awesome. I'm really grateful for the win and the nomination, and I was looking forward to it. I'm happy. I was looking forward to winning though, because you know I'm a national kickboxing champion in MMA, so I probably should get the knockout of the year.
Yeah, man, you won your first two fights, both via knockout, and then you returned. You took a super tough fight against a really tough guy, Ashton Eyler, in your last fight, and you lost via Darce choke in the first round. What did you feel like you learned from that fight? I know you definitely got caught early in the first round, but do you feel like you learned and got better as a fighter in that one?
100%. Yeah, I think that I learned to not, because he was a really really good D1 wrestler. I knew that. Um, I didn't know that he was a national qualifier and for the NCAAs and stuff like that. So he was a really good D1 wrestler, but I would definitely not let that get to my head. If I fought another D1 wrestler, I would try to implement my game, my will, and play my game. I definitely got him being a super, super good, talented D1 wrestler kind of get to me and, not perform as well as I should have. But nothing to take away from him. He went in there and did what he was supposed to do. For him to stand with me would be stupid. The same thing if for me to shoot a double on him. you know,
Yeah. Yeah, I always it's always interesting. I feel like guys, amateur fighters take either one of two routes. It's either the quote unquote easy route where you're fighting guys that maybe aren't to your level or not tough competition or testing you, or you're the guy that's facing the absolute toughest guys you can. And it looks like that's your game plan, man, especially as an amateur. And that's a smart game plan. You've actually got your next fight coming up at Cage Thunder 31, April 12th. You're facing another tough wrestler, undefeated guy, 4-0 Jackson Dougherty. Tell me about your thoughts going into this one, and what made you want to have a quick turnaround and face yet another wrestler.
I just want to fight, and I know that last fight doesn't display my skills and who I am. After that MMA fight, I went and fought 5 days later at the national kickboxing tournament and won that. Um, but I know that doesn't display my skills because I've been wrestling since I was 7 years old, so I can wrestle too. I'm not just a striker. And nobody wanted to fight Ashton, so I took the fight against him, and nobody wanted to fight me, so he took the fight and stepped up. So, but you know, whether somebody's a wrestler, a grappler, or a striker, they could do whatever they want and focus on one aspect of MMA. I don't look at myself as a striker or a wrestler or a grappler. I look at myself as a martial artist and a mixed martial artist. So I know that I'm strong everywhere. Um, and even I was defending well even against Ashton, but just I got an underhook and half guard and was trying to use that to stand up or sweep. He just you know sunk in a Darce and it was super tight, and that was that. But I'm honestly, I'll fight anybody. I've fought in kickboxing. I've fought a 5-time Russian champion and a 2-time world champion who had 450 fights. So after fighting somebody who had 450 fights, why would I be afraid of fighting some local bum who's 4-0?
Yeah, so one of the things I did see that you won the national kickboxing championship down at the Arnold in March. You've been a very busy guy, man. So you went down there, won the national kickboxing championship, and now you get the opportunity to represent the USA in Abu Dhabi in November. Is that something what's your thoughts about getting to compete on a world stage?
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome, man. That's gonna be awesome representing the United States, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm definitely going for gold. You know, uh, 1 year, like I said, that Russian dude I fought, he was the uh, world champion twice, and I was whooping his ass in the first round, and it went to a decision. So I definitely 100% know I can take a gold, and bring back gold back to the United States.
Yeah, and you briefly mentioned that you started training, martial arts when you were 7, and you've trained in karate and kickboxing, sambo, and you said that that's one of the. I've seen other interviews where you said that that's what you feel like makes you a true and well-rounded martial artist. Talk about that a little bit, like just training in so many different disciplines, and for you, I know you've mentioned that you first have gone into those specific disciplines and then put it all together for MMA. But talk a little bit about kind of your thought process behind that.
Yeah, so I think because mixed martial arts is a complex, it's a complex sport in and of itself. I think it's made up by, you know, individual martial arts, so you have to know the individual disciplines in and out. And then I think it's made up by combining two or more. And then the third thing is I look at MMA as its own martial art. So you have to train and be well versed in all three of those. Most people just think it's the first two or the last two, but it's really made up of three components. The individuals combining the individual sports like boxing and wrestling, and then you have MMA as its own sport and its own martial art. So, and it was fun training all that. I started when I was young. I trained in Europe. I trained all over Europe. I got to train all over the United States. I've trained at Rufus Sport and different gyms. And honestly, when you get well versed in each martial art like that, you find that there's so many like generalized similarities that can be, translated to each sport. So
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely something interesting. I feel like the so many people, obviously the early days of the UFC, people came from specific backgrounds, and then people started training just in specifically MMA, and now it seems like a lot of fighters are actually kind of going back and doing similar to what you're doing, where they are maybe competing in MMA, but also competing in the individual sports, whether that be grappling or striking or sambo, wrestling, anything like that. So do you feel like that's a little bit of the evolution of MMA, kind of going almost back to the roots of how the sport of MMA started? Obviously, martial arts has been around forever, but the sport of MMA is still we're still only like 30-ish years into when right after the UFC started. You see that kind of people and a lot of fighters going back to their roots of training and competing in different disciplines.
yeah, I think it's an evolution, and I think it's just people going back and forth from phases. Like they're early on, like the Matt Hughes days. You know, early on it was jujitsu that was dominating, and then the Matt Hughes days it was like wrestling that was dominating, and then strikers came in and dominated. Then it went back to jujitsu, then it went back to striking, then wrestling. I think it's just and then for a brief second you had Gary Tonin compete in ONE FC and won like 8 of his fights in the first round by heel hook, and then everybody's like, "Whoa, heel hooks are the new thing in MMA." And until he got caught, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's just I don't really think it's an evolution, but I think it's just people switching from phase to phase, because fighting's fighting, like 2,000 years ago when they were doing pancrenation, they were probably, still combining everything, wrestling, kickboxing, some type of jujitsu, and boxing. So, if you got 2 arms and 2 feet, there's not much else you can do, you know?
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask you about. So I know I think you were born in the U.S., but your family is originally from Serbia, and you actually spent some time, living and moving back and forth between the U.S. and Serbia, and I guess other parts of Europe as a kid. What was that like? Being able to live in both the U.S. and then also a completely different, type of environment over in Serbia.
It was a big different change, you know. I'd say in the US, life is a lot faster and a lot more organized. And then over there in Serbia, life's a lot slower and it's a little bit sporadic, like, and spontaneous. Because I know, like, for example, when I was going to school here as, I don't know, 9 year old, when you went to have lunch in school, you had it in the school cafeteria. But then when I was 7 years old in Serbia, man, when it was time to eat, you left school, walked the streets by yourself, found a restaurant or cafe, and that's how you had to go eat. There was no cafeteria or this and that. And the training was, there was no, we didn't have any cable or TV or internet. So after you got done with school, which was only 4 hours at the time, you're going doing judo or boxing or wrestling from 1 p.m. all the way to 7 or 8 p.m. And everybody over there and their grandmother does sambo or wrestling or boxing.
That's awesome. So yeah, so you got the kind of best of both worlds, I guess, and learning, and that is such a unique thing, especially when I've traveled internationally, like you just realize the whole world it's obviously a big world, but it's so different in different ways of life. But I feel like that's a great lesson to learn really early in your life, so that you're not limiting what you can do. Um, the other thing I really wanted to ask you about is your gym. So I know Rising Dragon, you guys have been around forever. Tiawan Howard and I don't know if Torrance Taylor is still around, but I know Tobias is definitely around still competing. But you guys are such a unique gym, especially in Northeast Ohio. There's in Ohio in general, there's so many wrestling and now a lot of jujitsu gyms, but you guys have kind of made your name from the striking aspect of it. Obviously a well-rounded gym, but the first thing I think of when I think of Rising Dragon is great strikers. Like, someone from that gym is going to be a really good striker.
Yeah.
Tell me about, what made you make your decision to train at Rising Dragon and kind of the reputation of the gym.
So I trained before then when I was in Ohio. I trained at a couple of different gyms, some jiu-jitsu gyms, wrestling gyms. And then when I found them and gave them a go, it was just their wholeheartedness and the investment they put into everybody. Whether you're whether you're a pro fighter there or just a recreational martial artist or you're just coming in to get a good workout, they invest the same amount of energy and time into everybody. And they really do put forth all their effort to meet you with what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to be a fighter, they're going to build you up and put time and effort into you. They're not just going to, you come in, you're the new guy and they've got, 5 or 6 fighters and all right, let's use this guy to, have our guys spar him and just beat the shit out of them. Like, they'll come in and they'll actually work with you and build you from the ground up if need be. If you already, like, I already came in with prior martial arts experience and prior competitive experience, but they just filled the holes that I had, and they also let me be me. They didn't try to change my game and make me a fighter that I'm not. So they worked around me according to my game instead of trying to make me something that I'm not and trying to make me a cookie cut fighter, which a lot of gyms do. A lot of gyms try to make every single fighter they have the same exact style, the same exact mentality, the same exact ways, and it just doesn't work because everybody's built different. Everybody's got different experiences and different style and different mentality.
Yeah, and like I said, it's always so interesting seeing, when you guys don't have a ton of MMA fighters, but it's always such quality fighters that come out of your gym. And like I said, I know we're gonna get some fun striking when we see a Rising Dragon fighter. So that's always circled on my fight card whenever I see one of you guys. And speaking of Rising Dragon, you actually have a teammate, Juan Goins, on the card as well. I know he is actually fighting for a title coming off of he hasn't fought in almost a year and a half, but already has one title. What's it like getting to fight alongside your teammate on the card?
It's gonna be awesome. We've been trying to get on the same MMA card for a while. We fought kickboxing together like 3 or 4 times, but always been trying to get on an MMA show together. And Juan's really good, and I'm happy. I'm excited to watch him fight, and I'm happy that he's back. And just to touch on something you said earlier too, the quality fighters, Rising Dragons. Yeah, it's quality over quantity. Because like I said, I trained at Rufus Sport. Uh, Everybody was there. Sergio Pettis was there. Anthony Pettis was there. I was going to the pro practices and the fight practices, and I'm like, damn. I'm like, everybody here that I'm training with, like nobody's better than Tobias. Nobody's better than Juan. I'm like, what? There's no point of a big gym. So I left Rufus Sport and I came back to Rising Dragon MMA.
Yeah, that's that I feel like that's interesting. I cover and follow MMA all over the place and watch tons and tons of fights, and I put Ohio fighters up against anybody in the country, especially like I said, I'm looking at fighters from all over the place, and yeah, there's definitely some great fighters in Ohio. And speaking of that, you're on the fight card Cage Thunder 31 back at Chaparral's down in Akron. Are you a guy who this is a really good fight card? Got 3 pro fights on the card. You'll probably be toward the end of the amateur portion of the card. But are you a guy who, after your fight, probably not before your fight, unless you have a teammate fighting, but do you, get your fight in and go out and try to catch the last couple of fights, or are you just trying to sneak out as quick as you can?
If I have a teammate fighting afterwards, then I'll stay and watch. If not, I don't really care. I'm there for myself. I'm not there for any other fighters or any other competitors.
Yeah, fair enough. It's always interesting because some guys are like, I'm just such a, I have to watch every single fight or any fight that I can. And some guys are like, no, I don't care, which is sounds like you are. This is your third fight for Cage Center. You're 2-0. I feel like you got to keep that streak going.
Whatever happens, happens. Honestly, of course I'm confident, but whatever happens, happens. I'm ready to go have a 3-round war and fucking be bleeding from ear to ear, covered in blood, or I'm ready for a first round finish. So,
Yeah.
already my ear, I'm getting cauliflower ear on both freaking ears, man. My forehead's banged up from all the wrestling and all the head position fighting. Um, Body's all bruised. I'm training, a lot of people talk and act like they put in the work, but they don't put in the work like I do. I'm putting, this is my second session today, about to be, up to 6 hours of training, 6 hours of training every single day. And hard rounds. Everybody's trying to win the round. Nobody's giving me any easy rounds. The wrestling, I'm training with, D1 wrestlers from Kent. Grappling, I'm training and rolling only with brown belts and black belts. And then striking, I'm training with, the best kickboxers in the nation.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's a deep gem. So you're 2-1 in your amateur MMA career, and you're also competing, obviously, in kickboxing. What's the ultimate goal for you for in the sport? Do you want to go pro in MMA? Do you want to continue to compete in both? Are you going to try to focus on MMA? You're still a young guy, only 24 years old, but what's your ultimate goal in combat sports?
The ultimate goal is to get to the UFC and to be the first person to win 3 titles in 3 weight divisions. That's the goal.
Okay, what
So,
weight divisions?
so welterweight, middleweight, and light heavyweight. So that's why amateur. I'm trying to take the toughest fights. Especially learning from kickboxing. You get nothing out of cherry picking easy amateur fights. With some people, I don't want to say who, you know, pick their first 3 fights. Look at their record. Oh, he's 0-5, 3-9, and 1-4. Congratulations, bud. If I got a street fighter from the bar, he'd probably beat him in the first round as well. So, there's no point of cherry picking easy fights and as an amateur, the best thing you can do is pick the toughest fights you can get and get as much experience. Because if you go throughout your amateur career picking easy fights and then your second pro fight you get some nasty Iowa D1 wrestler and you're like, oh shit, I never fought this before, I never felt this before, and he just dominates you, now you're 2-1 as a pro, then that's bad. So all my fights have been tough fights. Nate LaRocco, he was a great wrestler, a great grappler. After our fight, he went on a tear, won like 4 fights in a row, fought for a title. Isaiah Simmons, too, he wrestled at 205 pounds and cut down to 170, so he's a great wrestler. And then obviously Ashton, D1 wrestler for Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. And, great grappler as well from the jiu-jitsu side. So every single fight that I've had, I've tried to pick. I didn't actually pick any of my fights. My coaches send me somebody, and I'm like, sure, I'll fight anybody. That's always my
Yeah.
reaction. They send me a person. I'm like, yep, I'll fight anybody. I don't care who it is.
Yeah, no, that it is interesting too that you said you want to move up in weight class eventually because I was especially looking at your last fight and you definitely have the frame to move up into bigger weight divisions and bulk up a little bit and move up to 205. That's a tough division though, man, with the athletes of the power of heavyweights and the speed of welterweights. But yeah, definitely like I said, I feel like you look like you have the frame to move up in weight class eventually.
Yeah, I could do it. I'm 6'3", so I'm tall for 170. I'm a big guy. There's not many 6'3", 170s,
Yeah.
and I've got to cut quite a bit of weight to get down to 170. So, and in kickboxing, I compete at 178. So that's closer to middleweight.
Yeah. All right, man. Uh, April 12th, back in the cage. Sinisa Jovic. Anything else? Anything else you want to mention, man? Any sponsors? Any of that fun stuff?
Shout out to Rising Dragon MMA in Cleveland, and shout out to Top Level Martial Arts in Cuyahoga Falls, and shout out to my sponsors, Distinct Auto Group and Balkan Events Ohio.
Awesome. Catch him back in the cage. Cage Thunder 31. If you can't get out there at live to Chaparrals, which is an awesome venue, you can catch it on combatsportsnow.com. And thanks so much for joining me, man.
Yep, thank you for having me, man.
Thank you. All right. We will be back next week with another episode.